Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Now, you have done something that few people could only ever dream of, being in space for that extended period of time. What kind of personality traits and skill sets are important to have as an astronaut if you're going to be in space?
The big ones, teamwork, being able to work and get along with your fellow crewmates, leadership, depending on what position you are in, being a good follower, I think is an important skill, but also the skills of, emotional skills, maybe you might call them, being able to deal with, being separated from your friends and family on Earth, isolation, although I never really felt all that isolated because you're always with other people. But there's that aspect to it, I guess, for some. And then also, beyond that is all those skills, kind of the hard skills you need to, be a crew member on this functioning spaceship, space station, orbiting laboratory. And those skills are very varied, whether it's being the space plumber or the electrician, the IT person, the scientist, the mechanic, the operator of the hardware, the doctor, the dentist, all these things that I've had to perform in space. So, it's an environment where if something goes wrong, you can't call for, someone to come up there and help you. You got to do it all on your own.
Now, humans have been aiming to land on Mars for decades. Just how far away are we from that actually becoming a reality?
I'll quote something my brother says, because he came up with this. Going to Mars, it's not about rocket science. It's about political science, because that's really what it's going to take. It's going to take a political movement to get the support, the funding, the international cooperation to do this. So it's potentially, a few years away, I guess, if you really decided you want to do something like that. But probably the reality is it's much further away because of the politics of it.
Speaking of funding, there's a lot of activity in the commercial space industry. Do you see this as the best way forward for us to further our exploration in space?
I think there's a good balance, a good synergy between government and private companies, or commercial, or, publicly held companies, whatever you want to call them. And, in the case of SpaceX, it's been very successful. NASA has been a partner of SpaceX. So we helped them with the funding to build a rocket, and then later a spacecraft to resupply the International Space Station, and then also to fly crew members up there. And by doing these kind of partnerships with these companies, I mean, even like Boeing is supposed to, have a capability soon to get to the space station. Other companies that resupply it. That allows NASA to focus on some other, maybe more challenging things, like building a rocket that can someday, hopefully not in the distant future, leave low Earth orbit, so we can do things like you mentioned earlier, like going to Mars.
And I'm curious, what was the most interesting or surprising thing you learned from being on the International Space Station?
I think the most important thing I learned, and that kind of surprised me, was, we have the capacity to do such incredible things in space, on Earth. If, building a space station that is the most complicated, sophisticated thing we've ever built, and being able to operate it for 20 years now, practically, and 18 years with people on it, and being able to do that safely is really an achievement and an example that, if we put our minds to something, if we work together in a cooperative way, as a team, we can do anything. And the cooperation and teamwork, and is something that I think is just critical to doing stuff that is really, really challenging.